Hello everyone and welcome to webinar 9 of the Lockdown Lunch and Learn series, and the title of this one is Dealing with Setback and Change. It's been fascinating listening to people from all sorts of different scenarios, dealing with all sorts of different situations, and it definitely is ups and downs as we are all kind of working out how to be during this period of transformation. So my name's Laura, welcome to this webinar 9. Let's crack on with the slides. Okay, so let me just put this onto the... Okay, fab. So, dealing with change and setback. The purpose of these sessions are to keep our professional skills sharp, maintained, ready for action on the other side, regardless of when that might be or what your current situation is. And I have found this content quite challenging to put together. So I've enjoyed it, but I've found it quite challenging. And I think the reason why I've found it challenging is I've been involved in writing and designing training courses for decades now, and there's so much stuff about change and setback that's out there on Google, for example. But what I wanted to do was not just copy and paste stuff. I wanted to really think about what are the precise conditions of this current situation, and understanding what that might mean in terms of dealing with change and setback specifically for now. I've found quite enjoyable to work out why. I wanted to make it really bespoke because there's something so unique about this current situation, and yet we can take and learn so much from historic stories of human endeavour and creating change regardless of setback. And what a better role model than Florence Nightingale. I'd sort of remembered stuff about Florence Nightingale from my time at school, but I hadn't quite clocked just how instrumental she has been in creating the healthcare that we see in this country and around the world right now. And Florence Nightingale transformed the role, reputation and rigour that nursing had. At the time, the role of nurse was just one step up from prostitute, and in fact, nurses weren't allowed on the ward at the same time as the doctor. That was the level of disrespect that a profession at that point had. So she turned it around and is a huge figurehead in the nursing world now. So I thought that might be quite cool to link to what she was doing nearly 200 years ago, and how that might give us some inspiration for how to navigate some of these new and unprecedented challenges that we're in. So next month is her birthday, and it's 200 years since she was born, and she had a transformational role in terms of the profession of nursing. It was not an easy or expected journey, as I'm sure you can imagine. And her legacy really demonstrates the monumental impacts that can happen when fiercely held beliefs meet gentle patience, which for me, I think is a lovely way to be a parallel to maybe some of the challenges and how we deal with stuff now. And she battled to reform the standards of care and the role of nursing in helping patients. And it's hard to imagine what modern life would be now without the dedication of this woman, who against all odds transformed the lives of so many by focusing on the basics. And so one of her big things was about how lifelong learning, and let us never consider ourselves finished nurses, we must be learning all of our lives. So that's maybe something we can take now. So this session, practical tips for handling change and setback, we're going to be looking at how do I uphold personal standards, accountability and pride during all of this change? What might be some routines and habits that I can set in that enable me to fall forward from the setbacks that I might be experiencing? And how am I going to manage expectations of others to remain proactive in change and setback? So as always, this is a judgment-free session. Take what you like, discard what you don't. This is new for us all. Hopefully you find it friendly, light and positive and rooted in commercial practicality. My goal always is that something that we cover you could use immediately after. And these 3 objectives are to provide some practical suggestions to help you thrive no matter how makeshift or temporary your current work position. So let's crack on with objective number 1. And all of these objectives, of course, are enabling us to be more foxy, which is it doesn't matter how good you were at dealing with change or setback 2 months ago. It's your capability to be able to adapt to the change around you now that actually is going to be the secret to crack this. So as Charles Darwin would have said, the laws of nature, you don't have to be the strongest or the fastest or the cleverest of a species to survive through rapid change. It's the species that are able to best adapt and adjust to the changing environment in which it finds itself. So how you might have dealt with change and setback before, or all of those years experience that you've had, there might be certainly some bits that you can take, but there might also be some new things that might be worth a think. So how do I line manage myself to uphold personal standards, accountability and pride during change? So this concept of managing oneself. And Florence was quite assertive about putting the role of ourselves and accountability in how we deal with the situation. If a patient is cold, feverish or faint, if he's sick after taking food, if he has a bed sore, it is generally the fault not of the disease, but of the nursing. So while there's some scenarios that I'm currently dealing with that are not just because of the disease that we're facing, but actually because of the way in which I am managing the situation. So that has caused me to really look at how much potentially am I just putting the blame at something that's totally external, because actually if I'm bored, listless, feeling down, then that's actually how I'm managing the situation, not necessarily the disease. So I thought there was a really interesting parallel between that. So the first thing maybe to have a think about that can help us deal with that is recognising that the current time of change that we're experiencing is a huge challenge, and to recognise that and accept that takes away that kind of performance anxiety. And one of the things that I think makes right now quite so fascinating and challenging is we're having to hold two contrasting energies at once, which by definition is going to create some ongoing conflict. It's a bit like a yin and a yang, and of course play those opposing forces together, you get a whole. But there's one half of us that is thinking, I've got to stay alert and poised because I could be called to arms at any moment. And yet on the other hand, equally this could last for months and I need to relax. On the one hand, I want to keep focused on the hopes, dreams, aspirations, goals that energized me before all of this happened, because it keeps my morale up. But I also need to accept that there's not much I can do to set the time frame or create the plan. I want to keep motivated and a feeling of agency in my life, like I'm in charge and I'm feeling of moving forward. And yet I need to be patient and wait for a high authority completely out of my control to tell me when I can go out. Now that is quite an unusual set of circumstances to have to kind of wrestle with. So I just wanted to kind of call it out in that the weddings, the parties, the celebrations, that all have been put in the schedule to have kept us focused and positive and optimistic. We know they're going to happen, but we don't know when, and there's not a thing we can do about it in terms of setting a new plan. So recognising that this is a unique set of circumstances we're in also allows us to, because the good news of challenge is that actually it's the work that gives us the pride. So accountability and pride are two sides of the same coin. I've always thought this. One can't happen with the other. It's difficult for me to take pride on something that I know I didn't really do much for, whereas the huge sense of pride when you do something that you found difficult is gives you a real buzz. It's the effort that creates the reward. So if we treat these two things as two sides of the same coin, what could you, however artificial, create a sense of accountability for you now and what you're doing now that actually means you can close each day feeling proud of how you've handled it? It's always fascinated me, the research around lottery winners. So lottery winners, people who come into sudden huge amounts of fortune, typically within 5 years they've lost all that money. So they're either more bankrupt than when they first won it, or it certainly hasn't been a good news story for them as time went on. And why is that? Because earning huge riches overnight, I haven't learnt the skills to be able to handle that huge richness. Whereas for those people who become millionaires, billionaires through years of working hard and toiling and dealing with setback, have the capability to be able to handle that money as and when it comes. And that's always stuck with me. So by us toiling through the changes and the setbacks we're dealing with now, what riches will wait the other side as a result of learning to be able to handle some of these new things. And one of the challenges I think is happening that's unique to right now is many of us might be missing the presence of a line manager. it's always fascinated me, the Hawthorne study. I'm not sure if you've heard about that, but the Hawthorne effect is where people act differently when they know they're being watched. Just knowing that our actions and outputs are going to be watched and measured raises the performance standards. It's like an observer effect. And the researchers, I think it's the 1950s now, they looked at a light bulb factory and they were working out, well, if we adjust the light, do the people make more light bulbs? They did. If we adjust the temperature, do the people make more light bulbs? They did. So as the people in white coats with the clipboards are observing, if we switch the lunchtime to people, do they create more light bulbs? And they did. And what became apparent over time is that any change that was put in, because it was being watched and monitored, had an uplift in performance. And so this observer effect is really powerful, and it might be something that you might be feeling like you're missing now. So if you're starting to feel like you're sliding into some habits that don't make you feel proud, then can you create almost an artificial line manager that creates that observer presence in your life? And the benefit that can have if you've got a bit of a day that's full of setbacks is that it allows you to stay on top of your own actions, to be able to fall forwards because you know that you're being observed. So could that be checking in with the same person at the same time, still creating some kind of semblance of professional structure, whether furloughed, working, whatever your scenario might be. But it's a huge phenomenon. It's called the Hawthorne effect. We behave differently when we're being watched. So people act differently when there's a CCTV. You eat less when you're out at a restaurant as opposed to eating a takeaway. So what could we do to manufacture that feeling of checking in and being observed to help us stay on top of what might be a challenging day? So how do I line manage myself to uphold personal standards, accountability and pride during change? As Florence would suggest to us, we've got to look to ourselves. It's not just the thing that might be out there that's creating some challenges. It's a unique challenge because we're having to hold two competing, contrasting energies at the same time. However, with that then comes the pride of knowing that you're handling something that is new. Through taking accountability, we can feel that buzz of pride, and increasing our self-awareness to recreate the presence of a line manager can really help if you're finding yourself slipping backwards a bit, because it just ups our game a bit. It keeps us professional. So the second objective, how can I set some habits and routines so that I fall forward from maybe a day that has given me some setbacks? And Florence was really massive about data and looking for data and tracking data. And one of her phrases is, the most important practical lesson that can be given to nurses is to teach them what to observe. So what might we need to be observing in terms of this experiment that we're all in that means that I'm focusing on the right things? My wonderful colleague Debbie has been talking about this for a while, and it's about the power of reviewing and closing each day with a respectful reflection, for we only get about 27,000 of them in an average lifetime. And being able to mark each day with some sort of recognition that it is counted means that when we look backwards, this time has had value as opposed to feeling like we kind of potentially wasted it. So the sunrise to the sunset, reviewing that day and closing each day with a respectful reflection is a useful habit to start or reinstate if that's what you used to do. If that was what you used to do on your commute back, then to review the day, then what might you do to still create that sense of satisfaction? And Debbie calls this a gale, because we all need a gale in our life, which is the 4 questions. What am I grateful for? What have I accomplished? What have I improved upon? And what have I learned? And however small, the minutiae of life, something to put a value on top so you can fall asleep at night feeling like you've actually made that day count. So ending the day with some reflection, typically a commute would have given us, and it would have triggered us to have done that. If there is no commute now, then how might we recreate that sense of reflection? Previewing the next day using a start, stop, continue. So for anyone that's ever facilitated sessions before, this is a beautiful way to get people focusing on the tactical stuff. So if I'm going to set my intent for tomorrow, because yesterday was a complete disaster, what might I think to myself? Things that I'm going to start, things that I'm going to stop because they're just not working. And actually, what are 1 or 2 things that probably help the day go through. So what might I continue? So based on today, what one thing could I start, stop, continue? It's a really neat way to do a flip chart with yourself about how to set the next day up. And the third thing, which is something that took me a while to kind of work out about the unique things of this particular situation, is that things probably are likely to bother us more the more concentrated the day is around that setback. So on a typical day, old time, when we were going around our time, you would have had maybe 100 different conversations during the day, depending on how widespread your network, everything from a car park person to someone sitting next to you on public transport, whatever it might have been. And so one dodgy call at 10 a.m. would have made less of an impact because you had lots more interactions that kind of diluted it. So I think this period of intensity, if we let it, is almost a call to how am I going to widen my network of voices, different ideas, different perspectives to reduce the impact that one duff event has taken. So if you imagine this is kind of like the perception of my day, we got a pretty concentrated day on the left, and we've got a pretty clearer perception of the day towards the right. So this was just my visual way of thinking. A day spent with just my own input, anything that happens that is a little bit, is going to have a heavy impact on my take on that day. If I can just add another input to add to the mix, it reduces the level of concentrate that event has had. If I can add in few different inputs to dilute the day, then again, that means the day is more than just that setback. And if I can give my day as much difference and as much variety as possible, then that one interaction that happened first thing has a lighter impact. And I think one of the things that is unique to now is that left to our own devices, we could just have a day where all we're doing is we've got our own input on this, which means it's a darker, heavier day. So what might I do tomorrow that means that, or now, to set up for tomorrow, a bit more of a varied day to diversify the data that I'm filling my time with? Because 1 or 2 days in your own head, that's fine, but 1 or 2 months where we have reducing our network can actually means that things start to feel a bit heavier than what they would have if they're a bit more diluted. So what could be some habits and routines that are going to help me fall forward? Reviewing and closing each day with a respectful reflection, grasping at whatever you can to be able to make the day count. Setting up the next day using a start, stop, continue is a really neat way of just owning, well, what can I do differently? And if a specific event has set you back, how could you diversify your day to dilute the impact that that event then had? Because unlike previous, there won't be natural dilutants that will float into your day. We have to artificially plan those in or schedule those in. So the third objective, how can I manage the expectations of others and remain proactive even if I feel like I'm not able to achieve anything? And this really resonated for me. Florence Nightingale, one of her famous quotes is, apprehension, uncertainty, waiting, expectation, fear of surprise do a patient more harm than any exertion. So the fear of stuff happening is potentially worse than the stuff happening. And so the call to action for nurses is to do what you can to relax the patient. And that really stuck with me, that. So how can we manage the expectations of others? Part of the fear, anxiety, uncertainty is potentially we've built up a perception of what is required for us during this period that actually is at odds with what we're actually capable of doing. So the first thing is to have maybe a real honest look at what are the things that are worth bothering about and what potentially is less worth bothering about. And here's a story that stuck out for me. About 10 years ago, someone told me this, and it really stuck with me. So it's an MD of a business I was working with, and his wife was a dentist. And he told me a story. He said, my wife says that so many people say to her, do I really need to bother to floss? Oh, I'm so tired at night. Do I really need to bother to floss my teeth? And this is the dilemma that would face me pretty much every evening. So can I be bothered to floss my teeth? And he said the response that his wife always gave to her patients was, yes, well, only floss the teeth you want to keep. Only floss the teeth you want to keep. which is a jolt and a reminder immediately of the longer term consequence of a short term sliding out of a habit. And it really stuck with me. And he would apply that to business development. So do I really need to do a catch-up call with that customer base? Well, only with the customers you want to keep. And it's a jolt to action to think about what is the stuff that actually is worth me tending and maintaining. So if you can feel setbacks balling up around you, deciding what is important for me to look after and maintain and what is maybe less so. And if you see a setback is about to happen, if it's important, do what you can. Floss the teeth you want to keep. Communicate in advance of a missed deadline for the deadlines that you are really, that mean something to you. Because we could all sort of look in this period at sort of other people over there or other situations over there and how they might differ from ours. But again, this is another phrase that's always stuck out with me. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. It's greener where you water it. So what am I going to be doing to water my particular area and look after the things and manage the expectations of the things that count? Otherwise, we're just going to potentially get lost in a whole world of feeling like we're not able to do anything. So the second bit is maybe having to think about your language when making commitments in the moment. So I definitely am, I can tend towards being a people pleaser. And so I have to watch that I don't overpromise in the moment because I want to please the person that I'm talking with, because all that then potentially leads to is having a massive crash, knowing that you're going to miss the deadline X amount of days or hours later. And I've thought long and hard of this over the years about what is it that would lead to someone really sensible, knows their stuff, what would lead to someone over-promising in the moment? And I think it's because we chase the instant hit of delighting the person who says, oh, right, wow, okay, that's quicker than what I would have thought. And that serotonin hit of, yes, I've delighted someone, at the point of us making the commitment, there's then a bit of a reality crash when you've done that with 10 people and there aren't enough hours in the day to be able to do that. So it's easy to fall into habits and patterns of say, yeah, I'll get that to you later in an hour. It's easy to fall into those patterns. And it's easier to fall into those when life is more fixed and timings are more fixed, but schedules have melted. And so flexible language might be worth thinking about the next time you are arriving at a commitment to be able to agree to something, either an output or something time-based. Because of course it's easy to say that I will definitely send you that report at 2 o'clock when you've got an IT team on hand, when you've got a fully stacked printer with all the toner that you could ever need, when you've got lots of people around you that can help you deal with the IT situation you've got on your laptop. Of course we can guarantee a 2 p.m. delivery time at that point. But a lot of those guarantees have now gone. And actually there might be more that's out of your control than ever. So how can we ensure that we're not making commitments that are based on shifting sands? And it can be easy to set ourselves up for a setback if we don't adjust our language in that moment of commitment. So rather than fixed language, could it be that more flexible language, like I plan to do X by Y, my intention is to send that over before the team meeting later. I hope to have this with you by the end of the week, and I'll do my best to ensure that I'll get the feedback to you by Monday. So the flexible language means that we are less likely to accidentally stitch ourselves up for a setback because we have overfixed on something that actually we have very little control over. So the third consideration for if you can spot that there's going to be a setback is how do I confess with confidence and take the lead rather than feeling like I'm being chased and I'm feeling like I'm getting kind of smaller. So how do I still assert myself? How do I still pick up the phone, have that conversation and confess with confidence that the initial agreement is not going to work, how potentially the plan was set. So how do I remain proactive and manage a new set of expectations? And the BIDS tool is something that over the years people have found useful as a format for planning or delivering a message that is around agreeing or influencing something. So you're starting off with your B, which is the background. So I know that I've got to have a phone call either with someone internal or someone external, and it's to basically say, we can't do what we said we were going to do. So what might be some background information that has since emerged from when we struck the deal or the agreement, whatever it may be, and what has led to that situation happening. So a little bit about background. Then nailing and highlighting the issue. So the particular issue around that time or that output is XYZ, and there might be some of the issues that are interconnected as well. The knock-on effects that issue has had is XYZ. It's also having a consequence over there as well. And in light of that, my suggestion is that we put a solution together, which is and my hope is that benefits you because of 1, 2, 3. So background, issue, direct impact, solution is a handy way to prepare, not script, but prepare the key points to be able to confess with confidence if you can spot that there's going to be a bit of a challenge coming up. And actually, rather than getting smaller and more kind of fearful about being chased, it's leaning right into it and bringing a proactive air to it. So BIDS works well as a planning tool and also as a way to practice a conversation that potentially is about managing expectations. So how do I manage expectations of others to remain proactive? Because worrying and getting into reactive mode might be worse for me than actually picking up the phone and having the conversation. So it's deciding what is important for me to look after and maintain, because you only need to floss the teeth you want to keep. You only need to manage the expectations of the people that you want to remain in your network. We need to be realistic when making commitments. So if you're a people pleaser like me, it's really thinking about using more flexible language rather than chasing the deal and potentially putting a fixed plan on something that is unable to be fixed right now, and taking the lead, owning the setback, and confessing with confidence using something like the BIDS format, which also works well for putting an email together as well. So here we are in April, May 2020. And so this picture is probably about 150 years old, and just ending on Florence Nightingale. I never lose an opportunity of urging a practical beginning, however small, for it is wonderful how often in such matters the mustard seed germinates and roots itself. This period of transformation is stretching our skills and developing our strengths in many new ways. When all the plans have been wiped out, it is a skill to keep poised yet patient. This learning is likely to be invaluable for the 2020s. After confinement, therefore, we could emerge better skilled for the future than when we went in. And dealing with change and being quick to reset after a setback are skills that are worth practicing no matter the topic. They are worth role modelling out loud for our children to see, because I'm not sure that we are going to have more certainty and more ability to schedule for quite some time. So the ability to be able to sit with that, not only to look after ourselves and to look after our own industries and our own set of responsibilities, but as role modelling as well for the next generation. And that was what Florence Nightingale was really key about, was how does she role model her fiercely held beliefs in not only for the patients that she was looking after right then, but for generations of nurses ever since. So keep human, stay foxy, just like our standing stones of Stonehenge. 5,000 years those stones have been standing. Just think of all the change and setbacks that they have seen emerge around them as all the centuries have passed. So how am I going to uphold my standards, accountability and pride during all of this change? There's something very unique about this particular circumstance. So how could I use those to develop the skills that actually are going to enable me to thrive in the decade ahead? What could be some really simple routines and habits that I could set that enable me to fall forward from a daily setback, to dilute the impact that an earlier setback might have? Now we maybe have to artificially create some of those dilutants that naturally would have happened before. And how am I going to manage the expectations of others so that I remain proactive whenever I can? Because to be taking the lead in a situation feels much more comfortable than feeling like you're going to kind of be chased. So my name's Laura. It's been an absolute pleasure to share with you hopefully some content that has felt fresh and relevant today. And feel free to pass this on. It's all in the spirit of enabling us to exit the other side better and healthier than potentially when we went in. And I wish you all well. Keep human, stay foxy.